The horn tore through the sky before I even had my boots laced, and my hands would not stop shaking. My name is Mia Bennett. 3 days ago, I was counting ration crates in a supply tent. Today I am crouched in a shallow trench on a ridge called cairn, holding a rifle I barely know how to aim, listening to a sound that feels like the end of the world walking toward me. The outpost was never meant to hold anyone off. It was a listening post, a place for quiet nights and boring reports. Half our garrison had been pulled away for another mission, and what remained was 12 of us, a sergeant named Callum, and a stretch of open ground between us and whatever was making that horrible sound over the hill. Callum grabbed my arm before I could freeze completely. "Bennett, you are a soldier now, not a clerk. Get to the line." I did not choose to move. My legs simply obeyed him, because obeying felt safer than thinking. The enemy came over the ridge like a wave of shadow and metal. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a strange rhythm, almost like a dance they had practiced 1,000 times. They were called the Korath, and every soldier on this world had heard stories about them, about how they never lost a fight because they made sure you heard them coming long before you saw them. They were chanting, a low, rolling sound that vibrated through the ground and into my chest. It was meant to frighten us, and it worked perfectly. I did not have time to be afraid in any useful way. My body acted before my mind caught up. I raised the rifle, and I fired, and I kept firing, because stopping felt like it would be the last mistake I ever made. I do not remember deciding to close my eyes. I do not remember opening them either. What I remember is the sudden silence where the chanting had been, and Callum staring at me with an expression I could not read. 3 of the 6 attackers on our section of the ridge were down, not moving. The rest had pulled back, faster than I thought something that large could move. "Reload," Callum said, his voice steady even though his eyes were wide. "They are not gone. They are regrouping." My hands worked without my permission, sliding a fresh magazine into place, my mind still stuck somewhere back at the moment the chanting stopped. The whole exchange had lasted, according to the logs recovered later, 11 seconds. 11 seconds should not change a life. 11 seconds should not become a story told across an entire war front by nightfall, but that is exactly what happened, and I still do not fully understand why. Here is the piece I did not know at the time. The Korath fight with their communication channels open during battle. It is part of their culture, a way of making sure every warrior's actions are witnessed by their entire fleet. Courage to them is something you announce. You warn your enemy, you chant your challenge, and you make certain the whole warband hears your victory. I gave them none of that. I gave them silence, because I was too frightened to make any sound at all. To me it was simply fear. To them, it was something else entirely. One of the retreating warriors said something into the open channel as he ran. Our translator picked it up hours later and gave us the words in our own language. He said the small pale one does not roar before she strikes. She only whispers, and then you are gone. That sentence spread faster than any order Callum could have given. By the time the sun touched the far hills that evening, every Korath unit within 3 systems had heard some version of those words. They gave me a name that day, one I never asked for and never wanted. Death Whisper. I found out about the name the same way I found out everything that day, second-hand, through people who seemed far more excited about it than I was. A communications officer named Priya pulled me aside near the medical tent, her tablet glowing with intercepted transmissions. "They are recommending caution around unaccompanied human soldiers in this sector," she said, smiling like she had just handed me a gift. "You frightened them, Mia." I did not feel like someone who frightened anyone. I felt like a girl who had been sick twice behind the trench wall, whose hands still would not fully stop trembling, who kept replaying 11 seconds over and over until they blurred into something unrecognizable. The rest of that day did not slow down to let me catch up. Another wave came at midday, smaller this time, testing our position rather than committing fully. I was placed at the center of the line, whether I wanted to be there or not, because word had already spread among our own soldiers, just as quickly as it had spread among the enemy. A young man named Elijah crouched beside me during that second wave, his rifle trembling almost as much as mine had that morning. "Is it true?" he asked, not looking away from the ridge. That you dropped 3 of them without a sound? I do not know what I did, I told him honestly. I just did not stop. He seemed to find comfort in that answer, which surprised me, because I found none in it myself. The second attack lasted longer, nearly a full minute, and this time, I was not alone in staying quiet. Something about watching me had changed the way the others fought. There was less shouting along our line, less wasted motion, more of that same grim focus I had stumbled into by accident. Callum noticed it too. "Whatever you did," he said afterward, wiping dust from his jaw, "it is spreading down the line. Keep steady, and the rest will follow." I did not feel steady. I felt like a stretched wire about to snap, but I nodded anyway, because there was no room left that day for anything except moving forward. By afternoon, Command had rerouted 2 additional units toward Cairn Ridge, not because the position was suddenly more important strategically, but because intercepted Korath communications kept repeating that name, and someone far above my rank had decided it was worth reinforcing wherever it had come from. I sat through a debrief that evening with an intelligence officer named Grace, who asked question after question about the exact sequence of events, the exact number of shots fired, the exact distance between myself and the first Korath warrior to fall. I answered as best I could, though most of it still felt like it had happened to somebody else, someone braver, someone calmer, someone who was not currently gripping her own knees to keep her hands from shaking. "You understand what this means for morale across the front," Grace said quietly, closing her tablet. "A name like that does more damage to their confidence than a dozen destroyed vehicles." "I did not mean to become anyone's symbol," I said. "Nobody ever does," she answered. "That is usually how it happens." Night fell over Cairn Ridge with a strange kind of quiet, the kind that follows a day too loud to process all at once. I found Callum sitting near the edge of the trench, staring out at the dark shapes on the ground that had once been enemy soldiers. "First one is always like this," he said, not looking at me. "No matter how it looks to everyone else." "I keep waiting to feel like it was real," I admitted. "It still feels like a story someone else lived through." "That feeling will fade eventually. What will not fade is what you did today, and what the people around you saw you do." He finally looked over. "You are still Bennett. Still the girl who could not release her safety catch 3 mornings ago. Do not let a name change that." I wanted to believe him completely, but a part of me already understood that something had shifted, something I could not undo simply by wishing it away. The Korath now had a story about me, one that would travel further and faster than I ever could on my own. My own side had a story too, one growing just as quickly among soldiers who had not been there, but had already heard 3 different versions by dinner. I was still the same person who had dropped a crate of batteries in shock that morning. I still felt every one of those 11 seconds replaying behind my eyes each time I closed them. But somewhere between sunrise and sunset, without ever meaning to, I had become something the enemy feared and something my own side needed. Maybe that is the real truth about moments like this one. They rarely feel heroic while they are happening. They feel like fear and instinct and hands that will not stop moving, even when your mind has gone completely blank. The story only becomes something larger afterward, shaped by everyone else who was watching, or listening, or repeating it long after the person at the center has already moved on to the next quiet, terrified night. I did not choose the name Death Whisper. I did not choose to become anyone's turning point. All I did was survive 11 seconds, I still do not fully remember, on a ridge I had never expected to defend, beside people who trusted me before I trusted myself. By nightfall, an entire war front knew my name. I was still just Mia, trying to figure out how to carry it.